At 2:17 in the morning, the radar screen changed. The air defense operator leaned closer. At first, he thought it was a glitch. But the objects did not disappear. One by one, more signals appeared. 30-7 unknown craft. They were high above the Atlantic, just outside U.S. airspace. They were not moving. They were not sending any signal. They were simply there. Within minutes, the room filled with senior officers. Satellites confirmed it. Ground radar confirmed it. Even space-based sensors saw them. This was not a mistake. F-22 fighter jets were launched immediately. The pilots flew in total silence. When they got close, they saw shapes blocking the stars. The objects were massive, dark, not shaped like any aircraft ever built. Pilot whispered over the radio, "Control. These things don't look mechanical. The surface looks uneven, almost alive." At 2:17 in the morning, the radar screen changed. The air defense operator leaned closer. At first, he thought it was a glitch. But the objects did not disappear. One by one, more signals appeared. 30-7 unknown craft. They were high above the Atlantic, just outside U.S. airspace. They were not moving. They were not sending any signal. They were simply there. Within minutes, the room filled with senior officers. Satellites confirmed it. Ground radar confirmed it. Even space-based sensors saw them. This was not a mistake. F-22 fighter jets were launched immediately. The pilots flew in total silence. When they got close, they saw shapes blocking the stars. The objects were massive, dark, not shaped like any aircraft ever built. Pilot whispered over the radio, "Control. These things don't look mechanical. The surface looks uneven, almost alive." The order came fast. Scramble the jets. Within minutes, 2 F-22 Raptors roared down the runway. The sound shook the ground. Base lights flashed red and white as the fighters lifted into the night sky. The pilots had trained for everything: enemy aircraft, missiles, even nuclear threats. But not this. Above them, 37 unknown objects floated in silence. The sky was clear. The moon was bright. And against the stars, the shapes were visible now. Huge, dark, still. As the jets climbed higher, the radar began to act strangely. Signals flickered. Distances changed without reason. It was like the objects were bending the readings around them. "Control, we have visual," one pilot said, his voice steady but tight. The craft were not smooth like metal. They did not shine. Their surfaces looked rough and layered, almost like rock or bone. And there were no wings, no engines, no lights. They did not look built. They looked grown. The jets slowed as they approached the nearest ship. It was larger than an aircraft carrier. Its shape was uneven, like a floating mountain. Then something changed. A long crack formed across its surface. The pilots watched in silence. The crack widened slowly, like skin opening. From inside, a soft green glow appeared. Then a thin mist began to pour out. It drifted gently into the air. No explosion. No weapon fire. Just a quiet release. "Control. It's venting something," the second pilot said. Sensors inside the jets picked up particles in the air. Unknown biological matter. The warning lights blinked. The pilots pulled back slightly, but stayed close enough to observe. The other ships began doing the same thing, opening, releasing, waiting. There was no attack pattern, no movement toward cities, no sign of aggression, just silent giants floating in the dark, releasing something into Earth's sky. Back on the ground, commanders watched live footage from the jets. No one spoke for several seconds. This did not look like an invasion. It looked like something else. Something wrong. Something desperate. High above the ocean, the fighters circled carefully, small and fragile next to the massive alien fleet. For the first time in modern history, the most advanced aircraft on Earth felt powerless. The enemy was not firing. The enemy was not chasing. The enemy was simply leaking, and whatever was drifting down from those ships was already falling toward the world below. By sunrise, the first emergency calls began. People living along the coast woke up feeling sick. At first, it seemed small. A cough, burning eyes, a tight feeling in the chest. Doctors thought it might be pollution, maybe a chemical leak. But by mid-morning, hospitals were filling fast. Patients came in gasping for air. Their skin showed red rashes. Some had high fever. Others were confused and weak. A few collapsed without warning. Something was spreading. The military had already collected air samples during the night. Special biohazard teams moved through affected areas wearing sealed suits. They carried small metal containers filled with air, taken directly from rooftops and open fields. Those containers were rushed to secure laboratories. The results were not normal. Under the microscope, scientists saw tiny floating particles. They were not shaped like any known bacteria. They were not viruses. They did not match anything in global medical records. They were spores, microscopic, organic spores. They were alive. And they were designed by nature, not by machines. The spores attached to human lung tissue almost instantly. Once inside, they began to multiply. The body reacted fast and violently. The immune system attacked, but the reaction caused swelling and clotting in the blood. For some people, it was too much. The illness moved through air, carried by wind. It did not need contact. It did not need touch. It simply needed breath. The connection became clear. The green mist released from the alien ships matched the particles found in the sick patients. It was not smoke. It was not fuel. It was biological waste. Inside the alien ships, thermal scans showed thousands of weak life signs. Many were unstable, as if the beings inside were struggling to survive. The truth was hard to accept. The fleet was infected, and in trying to survive, they were spreading their sickness into Earth's atmosphere. Emergency meetings began immediately. Cities prepared for lockdown. Flights were canceled. Military units set up containment zones near the coast. But fear moved faster than the spores. News channels showed images of the dark ships above the ocean. Social media filled with panic. This was not a bomb. It was not an invasion with guns and fire. It was something far more dangerous. An invisible threat. A disease from another world. And every breath now felt uncertain. The sky above looked calm and quiet, but the air itself had become the battlefield. Deep under the Pentagon, in a secure room with no windows, the lights stayed on all night. Generals, scientists, intelligence officers, the president. No one spoke at first. On a large screen at the front of the room, live images showed the alien ship still floating above the ocean. Silent, massive, unmoving. Below them, maps glowed red where people were getting sick. The numbers were rising. A general finally broke the silence. We can take them down. Missile ranges were calculated. Strike plans were ready. Submarines were already in position. Fighter jets waited for the order. Militarily, the United States could fire within minutes. But a scientist stood up. If we destroy those ships, she said calmly, we release all of it. She pointed to a diagram on the screen. Inside each alien craft were massive amounts of spores. If a ship exploded in the upper atmosphere, Wind currents could spread the particles across the entire continent. Not thousands infected, millions. Maybe more. The room grew quiet again. Another option was discussed. Let them land in a controlled area. Quarantine them, study them. But landing meant direct contact. It meant soldiers, doctors, and cities exposed at close range. It could become uncontrollable in hours. Then a communications officer spoke. "We are receiving patterns from one of the ships." The screen changed. A simple signal appeared. Prime numbers. Repeating sequences. Clear, intelligent structure. They were not random. They were trying to communicate. The aliens were not firing weapons. They were not moving toward cities. They were holding position, as if waiting. A new understanding slowly formed in the room. This did not look like an attack. It looked like a crisis. The aliens were sick, and they knew their sickness was spreading. The president leaned forward. "If we fire, we may save ourselves today," he said quietly. "But we could destroy any chance of understanding tomorrow." Time was running out. Hospitals were filling. Fear was spreading across the country. The easiest decision was to attack. The hardest decision was to wait. To think. To try to talk to something completely unknown while people were already dying. Above the earth, the infected fleet remained still in the dark sky. And below, humanity faced a choice that could decide its future. Not just with weapons, but with wisdom.